When I was about 15, my family and I moved into a large house. It was a relatively new home with 3 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a garage, and even a large basement. Both of my parents were in the upper medical industry and worked several hours of the week. This meant that I would be home alone for the majority of the time while they were gone. I love staying alone as I like to think of myself as mature and adult-like. At the time, we lived in somewhat of a rural area of Knoxville, Tennessee. Those who have been to or live in Knoxville will probably relate to what I'm talking about. While it was a nice city, the crime rate was high, and during this story, I got a taste of what that looks like. One evening, I had come home from school and my parents were at work. Unfortunately, this was around the time where COVID was still rampant, so my parents had to work extra. 15-year-old me immediately hops onto Call of Duty to cure my boredom. I play some matches for a few hours or so before going up to my room and taking a nap. I'd say I slept for a good 2 hours or so before I awoke to a noise from the kitchen. Looking back, it kinda sounded like a clanking noise you'd hear when moving stuff around. I wake up and take a look at my clock. It was around 7 p.m. I was genuinely annoyed from this noise and put on my slides and went downstairs to see what it was. I ever so slowly turned the corner and what I saw chilled me to the bone. There, in the kitchen, was a woman going through our fridge. She had her back toward me, so she couldn't see me or know that I was there. To provide a little more detail, she was not at all a pleasant-looking woman. She looked homeless, and looking back, I'm pretty sure she was. She wore torn shorts, a tank top, and some sort of wristband. I put my hands over my mouth and slowly went back upstairs. As much as I wanted and needed to call the police, I couldn't as the only home phone we had was near the kitchen. Instead, I thought of another idea. My parents were friends with the neighbors from down the road, so I'd figured I'd go there and call the police. Now, I obviously couldn't have gone through the front door, so I did what anyone else would do. I opened my bedroom window and climbed out while gathering up the courage to fall. When I finally did, I hit the ground with only a sprained ankle and made my way over to the neighbors where I explained what happened. They, of course, instantly let me in to use their phone to call 911. In the meantime, they made a call to the hospital my parents worked at. The police ended up coming a lot faster than I thought and entered my house. Within a minute, they came out with an old, tired, lanky woman in handcuffs. However, she didn't try to get away or resist arrest. She seemed somewhat neutral about it, as if she had accepted her defeat. As it turns out, my theory was correct after all. She was a dangerous homeless woman who had broken into several homes in the area. My parents had come home soon after where they had spoke with the police where they then recommended we get cameras. And that's exactly what we did. The next day, my dad went out and installed a high-tech security system around the house. Surprisingly enough, the story didn't end there. It wasn't until a few nights ago where I had brought up the incident to my mom and asked if she remembered about it. Her eyes went wide with this look of fear and worry. When I asked what the matter was, she sat me down, held my hands, and said she was going to tell me something I didn't know. When her and my dad were talking to the cops that day, the cops had mentioned something that would shock them to their core. When they had entered my house, they had found a woman standing outside of my bedroom door. In her hand was one of our kitchen knives that she appeared to have been gripping tightly. Let's just say that if I hadn't jumped out of my window, things probably wouldn't have ended well for me. Thankfully, we hadn't had any break-ins as of today, and I hope it stays that way. When I was around 18, I had gotten let go from my job as a part-time retail associate in Iowa City, Iowa. The reason for my termination was because the company was going bankrupt and couldn't afford to pay their employees. At the time, my parents made me pay rent and other expenses, and because I no longer had a job, I had to find a new one. Searching for a job was a hassle, and it didn't help that there weren't many jobs that were part-time. On top of that, I was also a part-time college student, which only added to the stress. Weeks had passed, and I still hadn't found myself a stable job. However, that was until one of my friends had called me, wondering if I could watch his dog as he was going on vacation that week. The reason he chose me was because the sitter who originally watched his dog had recently moved 3 states away and he couldn't find anyone else. The pay was $600 for 3 days, which was still enough to get by, but meant I would still have to find another job soon. Desperate for pretty much any pay, I accepted his offer and agreed to look after his dog. His dog's name was Jem. She was a gorgeous saddleback German Shepherd with the personality of a teddy bear. Of course I was intrigued. I had arrived to his house where he had left a list of all the rules. Feed her at this time, let her out every 2 hours, give her walks, etc. Basically the usual responsibilities when owning any dog. Caring for a dog may seem easy, but it gets stressful after a while when you constantly have to let them out. The first night went smoothly with no accidents and had gotten done every rule on the list. However, that was until the second night of dog sitting, where something happened that would completely shock me. For some context, it was around 8 or 9 p.m. I had ordered some food and was watching a movie with Jem laying next to me. At one point during the movie, she sits up and perks her ears while tilting her head, as if she saw or heard something. The house was next to somewhat of a wooded area, so I had figured it was possibly a squirrel or some other critter. Soon after though, she started looking around and began barking in the direction of the hallway. Almost immediately, she jumps down from the couch and runs to the hall. At this point, I started to get a little worried as I didn't know what she could possibly be barking at. Curious, I follow her and see that she's barking at the door that led into the basement. I didn't even dream of opening that door and instead pulled her away. However, she wouldn't comply and pushed the door open, fleeing down the stairs. Darkness filled the basement, and so I get out my phone to help light my way down. This was before Apple had built-in flashlights, so I used my screen to illuminate whatever was down there. After feeling around for it, I find the light switch and see Jem sitting by a small closet door. This was one of those closet doors with the see-through ridges, so I was able to slightly see inside. Ever so carefully, I approached the door and pulled Jem away, but not before taking a quick look inside. Staring back at me was an eye. Pretending not to notice, I drag her out of there and run to the living room to call the police. I tried my absolute best to whisper into the mouthpiece as I didn't want to make any noise. However, even with me being so quiet, it didn't help as Jem was still barking. As I'm on the phone with the operator, I begin to hear someone coming up the wooden steps from the basement. The person slowly knocks, as if it were a way to frighten me even more. All the while, Jem was barking her head off, trying to break down the basement door. The sounds of sirens being heard in the distance was music to my ears as they drew closer. All the while, I hear the person down there start running down the stairs and hearing a door open. Fortunately, police were fast to respond as they arrived to the house in minutes. As it turns out, police had found what appeared to be some secret room in the basement. Me, nor my friend, had any acknowledgement of this room and didn't even know what it was for. Our best guess was that it was some sort of wine cellar that was used back then. My friend paid me extra for the trouble, and I never dog sat for him again. I'm not sure if police ever found the man, or the possibility that he's still out there somewhere. The scariest part about this is that there was reason to believe the man had been hiding in that room for months. Inside were stolen items, beer cans, food, and even a sleeping bag. My friend had since moved cities recently as him and his family couldn't shake off the paranoia. This just goes to show you that you can't even enjoy the safety and comfort of your own home. For a bit of context, this happened to me about a week ago in the middle of the night. I'm a 27-year-old male and live alone in a small one-bedroom house in our rural area of Idaho. I was never the type to enjoy cities, nor was I the type to be around a lot of people. I just wanted a nice and quiet life, which is why I chose Idaho. Just this past week, I experienced something while home alone that I just had to write about. It was around 8 p.m. and I was at home cleaning the house when I hear my washing machine ring, letting me know that my clothes were done. My washer and dryer are both located in the basement of my home, so I went down there while turning on the light when I noticed something odd. One of the shelves that had been up was now face down with tons of my tools scattered around the floor. This was strange as it was pretty sturdy. Why I didn't hear it fall over, I don't know, but I stand it back up and tend to my laundry. I take out my clothes and put them into the dryer, and the second I do, the shelf from behind me falls over and creates a loud crash. I instantly turn around to face the direction of where the shelf had fallen, and there, standing next to it, was a tall, lanky man with a disturbing grin. He wore a white shirt, baggy pants, and just simply looked dead inside, as if he were extremely tired. I wasn't sure what it was, but something about this man really creeped me out, and not to mention that he kinda looked like L from Death Note. The minute I laid eyes on him, I let out a, "Who the hell are you?" in a short, scared, angry tone. He gave no response and just kind of stood there looking at me, staring into my soul. Figuring he might have been in the possession of drugs, I calmly asked him if he needed help or was lost. Even with my calm approach, he still didn't talk or even move. Not knowing what to do, I call police and tell them my situation. They said they'd send someone over, but that it could take a while due to extreme weather conditions. After I had hung up, the man had still been staring at me with his baggy eyes doing seemingly nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he simply turned around and walked back up the stairs and out the back door. I of course followed him, and he kept walking away from my house, disappearing into the night. There aren't any houses or other forms of civilization for a few miles, so I was confused as to who he was or how he got here. He hasn't been back since, and although it was a pretty creepy experience, I'm glad he's now gone.